The morning broke slowly over the prairie as Silas Monroe worked at the barn, saddling a horse and humming a low tune. He was a solitary cowboy, a man used to living by his own wits on this wide, empty land, and the silence of dawn was as familiar to him as the creak of his old saddle. Frost glistened on the ground. The air was sharp, cold. The sky was a pale blue beginning to blush with sunrise. In the quiet, Silas felt safe. He finished tightening a cinch strap and then paused, noticing something off the quiet. A distant, terrible sound. A scream rent the air, raw and desperate. It was closer than he'd expected. Silas's heart seized. Whatever had cried out, it was alive and in pain. Without thinking, he dropped the stirrup, kicked free of the saddle, and vaulted down. One hand dove for the Winchester rifle from the barn wall. Another grabbed the long-brimmed hat from his head. He shoved it back up at a rakish angle, and he darted out across the frost-crusted yard toward the fence line. In the early light, the scene was almost unbelievable. Against the weathered wooden rails, slumped and tied tight by coarse rope, was a young woman. Her ankles were twisted, rope digging into her skin. Dark hair, damp from frost, clung to her pale cheeks. She wore a torn shawl over one shoulder and a dusty, ragged dress that had once been a skirt. Bruises ringed her arms and neck. Her calves and feet were scratched and red. She lay with her head bowed, breathing in short gasps. Silas slowed as he neared. He came within 20 paces and froze, not wanting to frighten her. The woman suddenly stirred and flung her head up, eyes snapping open like a cornered animal's. When she saw him, a hysterical, broken scream tore out of her. "Don't touch me!" Silas halted on one knee. He held up his hands in the universal gesture of peace. The rifle hung at his hip, but he did not raise it. All at once he understood. This terrified girl expected only harm from anyone who came near. "I heard you crying," he called softly, voice calm. "My name's Silas Monroe. I live out here on the ranch. I'm not here to hurt you. Do you know that?" The girl's eyes roamed him, hat, face, suspenders, boots, as if deciding if he meant it. Her chest heaved. "I won't hurt you," he assured again. The words had been rehearsed in his mind. "Whoever left you here is gone. Help has come. You're safe now." Slowly, ever so slowly, the girl relaxed a fraction. She glared at Silas defiantly for a moment, searching for some trick. Then her knees buckled from under her, and a strangled cry escaped her lips. Silas rushed forward and caught her arm, easing her to the ground gently. He did not hoist her to her feet. Instead, Silas pulled a folded wool shirt from the horse saddle, his own thick shirt, and gently lifted her head to rest on it. The shirt was warm even in the morning air. He kept one hand on her back to steady her. In the tense silence, only her shivering breaths and his steady heartbeat filled the air. The dog in the barnyard gave a startled bark, then settled again. Finally, after a long moment, the girl croaked out, "He left me here to die." Silas's jaw tightened. He swallowed hard and forced his voice soft. "Not on my watch," he said quietly. He pressed a hand gently against her shoulder. "You're not livestock. Nobody's going to do that to you again." The girl's eyes filled with fear and something like disbelief. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a canteen of water. "Here," Silas said, careful and low. "Drink." She took the canteen with trembling fingers and managed a sip. The cold water bit down her throat. She swallowed a bit awkwardly, then nodded. Silas gave her a moment to calm. In the next minute or two, he moved a safe distance away, but still within sight, and set the Winchester down. Then he turned back and worked at the ropes around her legs. Inch by inch, he cut the tough fibers. Each cut made the girl wince, but he kept speaking gently. "Nearly free," he said softly. The last cord fell away, and Emma Carter's legs freed. She sagged against the wood. Silas reached under her arms and gently lifted her up just enough to slide the shirt back under her head properly. He looked up at the sky. It was turning gold. "You okay?" he whispered. Emma's head lolled forward, too tired to answer. Silas took her free hand and felt a slight pulse. She was cold but alive. He had expected much worse. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's get inside." He reached for her good elbow. Emma opened her eyes, dazed, and let him lead her toward the cabin. For a moment he worried she might resist, but she simply let him guide her. Inside the small cabin, the wood stove glowed faintly from embers. Silas laid her down on a pile of straw that he quickly moved to the hearth's warmth. The walls were rough-hewn, and only one low window provided light. He cupped his hands around a match and struck it, feeding kindling into the stove. Soon a bright flame roared. He knelt then and set a cast-iron pot on the stove. The smell of anise and roasted meat soon filled the air. The girl, Emma, wrapped in Silas's spare blanket, sat shivering. Silas set a tin mug of lukewarm water into her hand. "Drink," he urged. She did. Next he ladled a simple stew, bones and carrots he had planned for dinner, into another tin bowl. Then he offered it to her. "Eat," he said firmly. Emma stared at the bowl as if it might bite her. Silas watched, heart in throat. After a full minute, she lifted the spoon with shaking hands and gingerly tasted a piece of carrot. Her eyes closed briefly at its warm flavor. She took another spoonful and began to eat in little bites. Silas knelt beside her quietly. He handed her bread from the shelf. When the bowl was half finished, he gently said, "Finish this up." Emma's hands were still trembling, but she managed to eat it all. When she finished, she only nodded sleepily. Silas cleaned the pot and wiped their bowl. Then he poured a fresh cup of water and offered it, still kneeling next to her. Emma drank it slowly. "You did good," Silas said at last, voice as soft as the stove's glow. Emma just nodded, too tired to speak. He used a scrap of cloth to gently dab at the corner of her mouth and something else. Dried blood on her cut lip. As Emma's eyes began to flutter shut from exhaustion, Silas pulled his woolen coat tight around her shoulders. He took off his own belt knife and placed it inside the coat pocket and stepped outside. The crisp air bit his cheeks. He returned a moment later with a blanket and laid it over Emma's blankets. She stirred just slightly. Silas leaned close. "Get some rest," he said quietly. "I'll be right outside." Emma did not answer. Silas settled into the rocking chair on the porch, keeping the rifle across his lap just in case. Outside, the dogs were grazing, and in the distance a wolf howl faded. Above, the western sky was bruised purple. Silas sat long into the night listening to Emma's quiet breathing from inside and the gentle whisper of wind through the grass. Finally, when he heard her breathing even and deep, he eased the rifle aside and rubbed his eyes. "Sleep now," he whispered to himself. Morning found him still in the chair, awake before the sun. Smoke from the cabin chimney curled upward. Silas quietly stood. Emma lay curled under the blankets, sleeping. He draped an extra blanket over her shoulders, then turned to the barn. The horses needed feeding. By midday the sun was warm. Silas poured the leftover stew into 2 bowls and carried them outside. Emma sat on the porch steps in Silas's oversized coat, watching fields. "Eat," Silas urged as he handed her a bowl. She looked at him, then gingerly took a spoonful. "Hot," she whispered, blowing gently. Silas smiled. "Careful now." He sat behind her on the porch rail. He noticed the bruise on her left arm and reached out. "Your arm, how's it feel?" he asked. Emma lifted her hand. "It hurts," she admitted. Silas gently raised her sleeve. The bruise was a deep reddish purple. He pressed around it carefully. "It'll heal," he said quietly. "Try not to move that arm too much." Emma nodded. Silas realized how hungry he was as well. He quickly ate half of his own stew bowl. When Emma finished, he took the bowls away. "I'll wash these," he said, carrying them back inside. When he returned, Emma had sunk back against the wall, looking tired. He set more wood on the stove and fetched another blanket. Emma took the new blanket and pulled it up over her shoulders. Silas kneeled by her one more time. "Listen," he said softly. "You don't owe me anything. No thanks needed. You get well, you stay. We'll figure out the rest later." Emma's eyes flicked up at him, surprised. A single tear slipped down her cheek. By the time the next sun set, the story of the rescue had traveled along the winds to Prairie Point. Neighbors exchanged quiet words. When Silas and Emma walked into town the next day, people turned away or lowered their eyes. Rumors, whispers, "Bill Carter's little girl," they said. Silas Monroe, taking in that troublemaker's child. Emma's chin remained high. She wore one of Silas's shirts, buttoned up, and her curls were brushed. Silas let her stand slightly behind him as they went to the general store. Inside, Mrs. Calhoun the widow was stocking shelves. Her sharp eyes fixed on Emma the moment she walked in, and she turned away with a sneer. After Silas paid for a loaf of bread and a jug of milk, they walked to the door. The August sun was hot. Silas tilted his hat back. That's when Mrs. Calhoun stomped out to confront them on the boardwalk. "Bringing your filth to town, Monroe?" she hissed at Emma, spitting on the ground. A few people on the sidewalk stared. Mrs. Calhoun pointed an angry finger. "Your father tied you up like an animal." She twisted her face. "That girl should be rotting in jail, not acting like she's one of us." Emma froze. Dust had flaked onto her shirt. Silas moved in front of her. His hand fell on the butt of his rifle, not in aggression but as a shield. "Now listen here," he said quietly. "No trouble. We're leaving." Mrs. Calhoun bent down, scooping dust and grit. She flung it in Emma's direction. Emma shrank back, eyes closed. A handful of sand struck her boot and scattered. "Cowboy." Mrs. Calhoun spat the slur under her breath. Silas's jaw clenched. He took hold of Emma's arm. "We're done," he said. Then he simply turned, led Emma back to the horses. Neither of them looked back. They rode out of town under the watchful eyes of neighbors. On the way home, they barely spoke. Inside the cabin that night, the anger and shame Emma had felt bubbled over. She fetched a cracked mirror from the drawer by the bed and held it up. She saw the bruises now yellowing, the wild dark curls coming out of their tie from brushing them countless times. The face looking back was pale and tired. For the first time she really saw herself, and it scared her. She dropped the mirror face down on the wooden floor, clattered, then lay still. Emma sank to her knees, hugged them tight, and let herself cry. No one was there to hush her or to tell her how strong she had been. Outside, the plains let the grass sway in the breeze, a gentle sound that meant nothing. Emma cried for a long time. Silas heard nothing, saw nothing, but he would learn every tear had been necessary. The next morning, Silas finished fixing a split rail by the corral when hoofbeats thudded from the road. He felt them before he saw them. A tension in the air, a sudden hush among the barnyard birds. 3 riders came over the rise. The leader wore a dark hat and rode a black horse with white fetlocks. Silas recognized him at once. It was Dr. August Waller, the town doctor who once talked to Bill Carter in passing. But he was not alone. 2 broad-shouldered men flanked him, rifles slung. Silas held the hammer still on his fence. He did not raise his gun, but he called, "Dr. Waller?" Dr. Waller dismounted slowly. His kind eyes, lined with concern, locked on Emma. "Miss Carter?" he asked. Silas felt Emma step behind him. He answered, "I'm Silas Monroe." Dr. Waller stood a few paces from the porch. In his hand, he held a folded piece of paper. Emma came out of the cabin, expression wary. "I have news for Emma," Dr. Waller said gently. He held up the paper between them. "This is from your mother, Mary Carter," he told Emma. "She asked me to give it to you if anyone took care of you." Emma's eyes flicked to Silas, then back to the doctor. Silas felt a chill. Dr. Waller unfolded the letter and read softly. "Your name is not Emma Carter at all," he quoted. "You are Eliza Monroe by birth. Bill Carter was never your father." Emma's mouth fell open. "What?" she whispered. "Eliza? My name?" Dr. Waller nodded. "It's true. Your mother hoped you'd find safety if she couldn't raise you. She knew you here were in good hands." Silas felt the air go out of his lungs. He spread his arms. "I'm the one who kept her safe," he said quietly. "She belongs here, right?" Waller offered the letter to Emma. She took it with trembling fingers. Silas looked at Emma, the girl he had nursed back to life and taught to live again. "Listen to your heart," he said softly, glancing between the doctor and Emma. "This is your home if you want it. I won't stop you from finding your past, but I'll be right here if you need me." Tears filled Emma's eyes as she read the letter's final lines. Through the glare of morning sunlight, Silas saw her recognizing the truth of her own name. She clutched the silver locket around her neck, the one with mother etched inside that Silas had given her, as if it were a lifeline. For a long moment no one spoke. The world seemed to hold its breath. Dr. Waller gently rested a hand on Emma's shoulder. "Whatever you decide, you know the truth now," he said. "I'll wait outside until you're ready." Silas pulled Emma behind him without turning to face the doctor. He laid a quiet hand on her arm. "We'll be fine," he said, trying to sound confident for her. Emma nodded, head bowed, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Behind them, thunder rumbled a quiet warning. The prairie held them in that hush and waited for Emma's answer. Silas drives Emma into town as the sun slides west behind the hills. The old pickup rattles along dusty Upton Road, past empty fields and the first fireflies flickering in the tall grass. Emma hunkers down in the passenger seat, still wrapped in Silas's wool shawl. When they reach the town's single dusty main street, Silas stops the truck in front of the old diner. Emma takes a hesitant breath. Silas offers a gentle smile. He doesn't need to speak. His warm eyes say everything. Emma nods and climbs down onto the boardwalk. "Go on inside," he says softly. He stands in the afternoon light as the diner door swings open. A bell tinkles. Inside, a few old farmers glance up from their lunches. No one stares at Emma. A familiar waitress named Mary, the one who used to smile at her in school, slips them both a nod. Emma slips to a curtained phone booth in the back corner. Silas sits at the counter near Mary, ready to wait. Emma feeds quarters into the blue phone. The din of the diner fades as she lifts the receiver. The dialing tone crackles through. Emma closes her eyes and takes a steadying breath. She dials first the sheriff's office. Her voice is low and shaking as she explains the afternoon's chaos. The drunken father, the fence, the rescue. After a moment, the line goes quiet. Then a calm voice answers, the deputy on duty. Emma listens as he confirms the news. Her father was found passed out on the road, bottles crashing around him. He's in the county detox now, charged with assault. Emma's lips tremble on a thankful breath. He won't be back. Next, she dials the school social worker. Guilt and fear make her words trail off in sobs as she tells the story again. The social worker's voice is gentle, patient. She promises, "You're safe now. We'll take it from here." The worker assures Emma she won't be sent back to her father. A lump rises in Emma's throat as relief floods her chest. Silas hears the whispered good news behind the closed phone booth curtains. Finally, Emma calls Mrs. Callahan, the art teacher in the next town who always took notice of shy kids. Emma's hands wrap the phone like a lifeline. Mrs. Callahan's familiar voice comes through on the first ring. Emma forces out a quick explanation. "Come back here at sunrise," Mrs. Callahan says firmly. "We'll help you, honey." Emma's knees weaken with relief. When Emma hangs up, Silas looks over. Mary has set a steaming mug of coffee in front of him, then appears with iced tea and a plate of pie for Emma. Mary's eyes go wide at seeing Emma, then soften. She only gives a gentle nod and quietly backs away, respecting their space. Silas pays quietly at the counter, then heads outside. From the porch, he sees Emma unwrap a turkey sandwich and take a bite. The tension in her shoulders finally eases. She looks up and catches Silas's eyes through the window. A faint smile plays on her lips, the first in days. Silas tips his hat and steps into the cab of the truck. They drive home under a bruised orange sky. Emma sits very still, staring out at the fields as the truck bumps over the last rise to the ranch. At last she lets out a breath. "Thank you," she whispers, voice almost lost in the evening wind. Silas only nods, parking the truck. Together they walk back toward the farmhouse. That night, after supper dishes are cleared and the moon hangs low, Silas leads Emma to the barn, where he's built a small fire in the corner. The stew he simmered for dinner is heating in a big pot. He ladles the thick broth of potatoes and beans into 2 bowls and hands one to Emma. They sit on stacked hay bales facing each other, the firelight flickering across Emma's tired face. Outside the barn, the prairie night is still. Somewhere a longhorn bellows softly. Emma sips the warm stew and looks up at Silas with tear-bright eyes. "Silas, thank you," she says quietly. I don't know what I would have done." Silas lifts one hand from his bowl to gently touch her own. He doesn't answer right away. Finally, he squeezes her fingers and says softly, "No child should ever face that alone." Emma nods. Her small shoulders shake as the last of her fear slips away. "I thought it was my fault," she admits, voice trembling. He shakes his head gently. No words are needed to reassure her. She can feel his honest kindness. A little later, Silas begins to hum a lullaby. It is a low, tender tune, one he used to sing to his own baby daughter long ago, whose cradle is now empty. Emma closes her eyes. The barn walls seem to breathe with the melody, and all at once, Emma allows herself to believe she might be safe. Silas waits until she has fallen asleep near the warm fire. Gently, he carries her inside and tucks her into a spare bed in the farmhouse, the one with a faded quilt stitched with blue flowers. Then he returns to the barn for his own long night's rest under the stars and watchful cattle. By dawn, the eastern sky is pale pink. Emma wakes to the smell of coffee and the sound of horses whickering outside. Silas sits on the porch railing, staring at the sunrise. He holds 2 metal mugs. He turns and quietly offers one to Emma. She accepts it and feels its warmth seep into her hands. "You saved me," she says softly, gratitude and wonder in her eyes. Silas only smiles and shakes his head slightly. "You'll save yourself from now on," he replies in a low voice. Emma watches the red-gold sunlight stretch across the fields. A new peace settles in her. She finishes the coffee and stands up, feeling stronger than she has in a long while. "I'm Emma," she says quietly at last, as if introducing herself not just to Silas but to this new life. Emma, the name of the girl her mother sang about in lullabies. Silas turns that way and that, as a proud hint of a smile comes to his face. "I'm Silas," he answers simply. Emma meets his gaze. Her grin shines like the morning. "I think I'll stay a while," she says, and she does. If their story touched you, please subscribe and follow for more soul-touching storytelling.